Have you ever played a board game where your heart is like racing by the end of the final turn? That feeling is tension, and your game needs it. I'm Mondo. I'm the senior developer at the Op Games, which is a publishing company known for Gnome Hollow, Flip 7, and a bunch of others, and I'm here to help you with your board game design. Today we're going to be talking about tension in game design. First off, a working definition of tension could be the emotional engagement that players feel that keep them interested and invested in the game that they're playing. Tension is a really critical part of any quality game design, because it creates emotional stakes, it makes the decisions that players are making feel meaningful. It also creates a dynamic between players that makes the overall gaming experience one that's memorable. And it keeps players wanting to come back and experience that same tension again. Now, tension in your game design can come from a lot of different places. In the games that you've played, you've experienced tension for several different reasons. There are certain game design approaches and mechanics that can be used to create senses or systems in which tension occurs between players. One of which is scarcity. If you think about a game like Agricola or Catan, players are competing to try and get limited resources. That scarcity makes the decisions that they're making feel meaningful. You're happy when you get the item that you're trying to get, and you're frustrated when you don't, but either way, you feel something as you're trying to acquire limited resources. This can also manifest in giving players choices that are hard, where you have to sacrifice one thing for something that is hopefully better. Another source of tension is uncertainty and risk. This happens in hidden information games, especially social deduction games, when you're trying to determine what side somebody's on or what team they're playing for. This also happens through randomness mechanics like rolling dice or drawing cards, where you're hopeful for a given outcome but you aren't sure. An easy example of this would be Yahtzee, where every turn you're deciding which dice to re-roll. And every time you do that, you risk losing the progress that you might already have in order to get something better. That tension can create really exciting moments when players are waiting to see the results of the subsequent dice roll or when it pays off. Another source is through deadlines or countdowns. In a game like Pandemic, you can see how much time you have left as the deck of cards gets smaller and smaller, and you have more and more time in between those epidemic cards that are in the deck. That feeling of a countdown can be really tense, where you know something bad is going to happen, but you don't know when. Additionally, if you have a game with a limited number of rounds, players can see the finish line, and they know how much time or how much gameplay is left in between the thing that they're currently doing and the end of the game. Another source of tension is the structure of the interaction between players in a game. And when we talk about player interaction, there are two different types. There's direct player interaction and there's indirect player interaction. Direct interaction is when players are in combat with one another, or where they're doing things to one another in the game. An example of this would be like Blood Rage or the Mistborn deck building game. The other type of player interaction is indirect interaction, which you see a lot in like drafting games. In Azul, for example, I'm drafting tiles out of a center drafting area, which changes the layout of what's available for the next player. So the choice that I make isn't directly impacting another player, but it is indirectly affecting the options that they have, which I can use to my advantage. One final source of tension is escalation. You see this in a game like Terraforming Mars, where the stakes are getting higher and higher as the game progresses. This ties into the idea of the countdown, but as fewer options are available of how to score points in a game like that, the tenser and tenser those decisions feel. What this can do is create a very climactic series of final turns. So as you're designing your game, it's important to think about how you're going to control or create systems in which tension can happen between players. An important piece of that is the pacing of the game. You want to make sure that the tension has an arc and that it doesn't stay flat the whole time. That looks different for different games, but the variation in that arc is going to create a very dynamic gaming experience. You also want to make sure that there are payoff moments built into your systems. That can be a dice roll at the end of a segment of rising tension, or final scoring systems, or some big reveal that happens somewhere in the game. Now, as you design to this concept, it's important to understand that tension does not have to mean frustration on the part of the players. You want your gaming system to provide that experience while still being something that players feel like they can overcome or beat, either by giving them options on how to pivot from one strategy to another, or providing multiple various ways to score or advance in the game. Because if your game is all tension with no payoff, players are going to have a harder time enjoying it. So to wrap up here, a game with a good tension arc and experience is a good game. It's going to help create an emotional shared experience that players enjoy and want to come back to. And regardless of how you work it into your design, paying attention to the tension that players feel and how they feel about that experience is going to drive your design process and make your game better and better. As you lean into that good quality tension and find ways to mitigate that frustration that players might feel if it's not well structured. But what's the most tense game that you've ever played or designed? Tell me in the comments, and thanks for watching. Good luck.